Can you achieve extraordinary results while making the world a better place? I'm Bruce Temkin, and together we'll explore how. Welcome to Humanity at Scale, Redefining Leadership podcast. Join me as I speak with visionary leaders and top experts to uncover the secrets of humanity-centric leadership. Ready to rethink leadership? Let's dive in. At Humanity at Scale, we explore what it takes to create a world where design isn't just about aesthetics or technology, it's about impact. The best design doesn't just improve products, it improves lives. But too often, design focuses only on the user, missing the bigger picture, our communities, our environment, and our shared future. How do we go beyond human-centered design to embrace something even bigger? How do we create systems that aren't just innovative, but also sustainable, ethical, and truly humanity-centered? To help us unpack this, I'm honored to welcome Don Norman, a legendary voice in the world of design. Don is the co-founder of Nielsen Norman Group, a former VP at Apple, and a pioneer in cognitive science and human-centered design. His latest book, Design for a Better World, Meaningful, Sustainable, Humanity-Centered, is a powerful call to rethink how we design, not just for individuals, but for the entire ecosystem of life. Beyond his thought leadership, Don is also founder of the Don Norman Design Award and Summit, a global initiative recognizing early career practitioners and educators who are making a tangible impact through design. Don, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I feel like I could have spent 25 minutes on your introduction, and I want to start the podcast with a heartfelt thank you from me, as I'm one of many, many people whose career have been heavily influenced by your work. So thank you for coming to the podcast, and thank you for all you've done for all of us who leverage your work.
Thank you.
Your career has spanned cognitive science, design, and technology, from academia to Apple to Nielsen Norman Group, a whole bunch of experiences. How would you summarize your journey in your own words?
Wandering, aimless, bumbling through. It's that I started off, you left out how I started, which was an electrical engineer, 2 degrees in electrical engineering, accidentally got into psychology because I wanted to do computers. And this was a long time ago. I'm very old. So this was in 1958 or 57. And I wanted to study computers, and I was at I got my undergraduate degree at MIT. Then I went to the University of Pennsylvania, where the first computers were developed. But nobody was there anymore. They had all left. They started in other companies. And so they kept saying, oh, if you stay here, you could eventually we'll start a computer science course. No, but just then psychology opened up with a new chair who was a physicist. And I heard him give a talk, and I said, oh, maybe I can, instead of building an intelligent machine, I can study this one. And he said, you don't know anything at all about psychology, do you? And I said, right. And he said, good. And so I entered the department and got a degree in mathematical psychology, got my first job at Harvard, and I went to Harvard and was introduced to the faculty. After Harvard, I went to this new university that just started up called University of California, San Diego. No one had yet graduated, but I helped start a new discipline, which we called Human Information Processing Psychology. I used my engineering into psychology, and elementary concepts in engineering were considered great insights in the new field. And actually, I've changed fields, as you started to say. I thought psychology was too narrow. So even though I had been chair of the psychology department for a while, I started the cognitive science department. I wanted to bring in neuroscience and linguistics and the social sciences. And I was already publishing in the AI journal, so I wanted computer science and AI. But after a while, I somehow got involved in the study of error. And I published a paper on that, which got the attention of the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And they had just had this big nuclear accident called 3 Mile Island. And so I was sent in as part of a human factors team to see why the technicians who were running the plant made the errors and couldn't even diagnose what was happening. And they assumed that we were going to blame them and also explain why they need better training. And we said, well, that plant is designed to cause errors. If you wanted to cause errors, you couldn't have done a better job. And I began to realize there's this field called design. I didn't know about it before, where I understand technology, I understand people. That would be interesting. So I started doing work for NASA on aviation safety and developed my field. But after a while, I was teaching. I had invented a field called cognitive engineering, which still exists in Europe. And I discovered some of my students who were working at Apple that had written the human interface guideline, and even the Macintosh, the early software, was written by a person who was a student of mine. And so I ended up consulting for Apple and also for Xerox Palo Alto Research Center.
That's an amazing journey. I love the way you started. You said, I bumbled along. Would you say you're still on that career of just continuing to find what comes next?
Something interesting happens, and I say, oh, I've never done that. So when we first started the Nielsen Norman Group, we were trying to be consultants, and it's really hard to enter the consulting business, especially in those years. That was 1997 or something, and nobody knew us, and so it's hard to get jobs. And so we had a client, and the client decided they'd like to hire me to be their president, and so I took it. And actually, because I didn't want to leave the Nielsen Norman Group, they actually gave the Nielsen Norman Group a fairly large sum of money for those times. But it's like this. If you take a look at AI and the early days of trying to get computers to do things that people could do, it was kind of funny. The things that people found really hard, that was easy to write programs to do. I mean, take a calculator, the simple calculator. It does arithmetic without ever making an error. People can't do that. And it can actually do algebra. Nowadays, it can solve calculus equations much better than people. But the things that people find easy, well, I used to use the example of shooting a basketball. And that, for example, it's easy to see the rim. It's actually hard. It takes a lot of skill to be able to shoot it just properly. The computer has real trouble seeing the rim. If it could only locate it precisely, then shooting would be trivial. It's just a matter of solving an equation and going boom. And so what we find easy, computers find hard, and vice versa. And so that's where, in today's GPT, it's doing what it does, which isn't the way people think. I keep trying to remind people it's AI, where A stands for artificial. And intelligence, it's not. I may not like the word smart, but none of the versions of smart applies to these computers. They are dumb. They don't have any understanding of what they're doing, but they're really good at what they're doing. And so it is valuable, and it is useful, and sometimes it leads you down the wrong path.
So that's great. I'm gonna then hit the AI topic. We're gonna go back because I want to hear a little bit more about sort of your view on the evolution of design. But let's go to where we are today. When you see what AI is, not smart, what role do you think it'll play, or either positive, negatively, or neutral, in humanity-centric design?
Oh, I think it'll be very valuable. For example, it is, first of all, it's real. This new type of AI, by the way, some AI is really routine, every day, but the everyday AI is so everyday that we don't think about it. And I use the example of a calculator. Well, the calculators are solving equations in algebra and in calculus. That's AI. It came from the AI community, but there's an old joke in AI that at first people think this is impossible for a machine to do. And then when you do it, they say, oh, that's just programming. And then they don't call it AI anymore. So as I tell people, when the first digital cameras came out, I said, oh, these are wonderful for snapshots. They'll never, ever be able to produce a high-quality photograph. It's simple, I said. It's a law of physics. So there's no way you can overcome it, because the pixel is so small in that detector that you're lucky to get one photon of light. So there's not enough photons hitting them to give you a good picture. And that it was true, and it's still true, except how come we have such wonderful pictures? Well, it's AI, which actually is really good at combining pixels and mixing them up and doing really wonderful computations and ending up with this beautiful picture, which is, I mean, so good that I used to always carry a camera with me so I could take pictures for publication or for use in talks. I don't anymore. I just use my cell phone. And so, and when you take a picture, it puts little rectangles around everybody's faces. That's AI. So
Todd, AI, I hear you say it's already embedded in like our everyday activity.
yes.
But you see a future where it actually can help the mission around humanity-centric design. Is it just
Absolutely.
continuing to do those things, or does it play a different role in your mind going forward?
No, I think it's going to be a powerful tool, but it's a tool. And people say it may be a collaborator. I've said the same thing, but it's not quite a collaborator yet, but I can see that coming. So I do use it.
Awesome. Well, you mentioned the design of everyday things, and I feel like I need to ask some question about that. For people who don't know, this book, I think you published in 1988. I think
The first edition, and then the second
first
edition was
edition.
2013. But look how
and-
long it took to write the second edition. Because the first edition was still relevant. The only thing is the examples were out of date.
Yeah. So I would say, from 1988, for the people in the audience who don't know, who listeners don't know, that was a foundational book, foundation for my work, and lots of designers, engineers, and leaders. Now, as you think back to 1988 and then the update, the whole book evolution of the design of everyday things, what are you most proud of in terms of the book and what the book has done?
Well, I was asked recently, what kind of a designer am I? What have I ever designed? And I designed simple things, but not big enough to make a difference. But I realized as I was asked the question that I have a different answer. I design designers. I'm an educator. And in fact, when I think about what's the best thing, what am I proudest of, it's my students and my books. And so in some sense, my students are now measured in, I don't know, it's tens, hundreds of thousands because of the book and the podcasts and the videos and other publications. And I have many books in design, about 10 or 11. And a lot of the words that I developed in the books are now common, everyday use. The word user experience is everyday use, usually not the way I intended. And the word affordance is in everyday conversation now. I didn't invent the term affordance, but I popularized it for usage. It came from a psychologist who was in perception, but an academic. And I borrowed the term from him. And it has had a big impact on people's lives, and that makes me very proud. But what I do today is somewhat different. Like today I start talks in which I say, this book, Design of Everyday Things, is wrong. And then but I say, how is it wrong? Well, what's wrong about it? Well, there's nothing wrong in the book. I still teach the book. I still believe in everything that's in this book. What's wrong is what's not in the book. And that's part of what was in your introduction. And so this book completes the story. It says, we never considered what we were doing to the environment to get the materials we needed for these designs, or the manufacturing process that spit out, pollution in the air, the land, and the water, or how digital designs were addicting people deliberately. We taught how to make products that were addictive, but we didn't realize what that would do to cultures and to younger people growing up who would spend all of their time addicted to the games and to the puzzles and to the social networks and neglect other things that would be much more important in their life. And so that's what humanity-centered design is. It's saying we have to pay attention, and we have to pay attention to all living things because we live inside the system that's called Earth. And although you may think that weeds and insects and things in your environment are are pests and not necessary for your life, they are necessary for your life. You know, a pest is simply an animal or a plant that's in the wrong location. So a plant in the wrong location we call a weed, and an animal in the wrong location we call a pest. And but the animals are just doing what they were evolved to do, and they're part of this ecosystem. This is really important. And if you destroy it, you don't really know what negative changes it's going to cause. So you have to really be cautious about, well, the earth.
So I love it. Obviously, you're on a Humanity at Scale podcast, right? So
yes, we have to do.
You have a lot of support for your ideas.
And the one other thing, though, I say is that we have to stop being colonialists, because what we taught in the design was, well, you should go and you should study the people and see how they really worked and what they really needed, and then we come back and do our analyses and produce the design and give it to them. How nice! And that's what colonials used to do. They used to travel around the world and find a novel country, and either they would take it over, saying it was empty, nobody lived there except the indigenous people, or maybe take the case of India. Oh, they're not governing themselves very well, so we'll take over the government for you. Isn't that nice of us? We'll help you. No, it wasn't nice. But when we do that, when we go for foreign aid and we see that there's a real sewage problem or public health problem or education problem, we say, oh, we send in the experts. And they study the problem for a couple of months and they come back and do a big proposal. And you just give us a couple of $1 billion in 10 years and we'll solve the problem. Well, it always fails. And it's not because the experts don't understand. The experts understand the problem and their solution is sensible, but they don't understand the people. You can't just give somebody something and say, this is your solution. First of all, it may not even fit into their lives. It violates all sorts of things they're used to. Second of all, it may require skills they don't have. If you really want something that people can really repair, well, build it out of bicycle parts and don't make it require air conditioning or clean water or electricity, because not every place has that. And the best way to do this is don't send in the anthropologists and the design researchers. Ask the people. They know what their problems are. They're probably already trying to address them, but they can only address the symptoms. They don't have enough resources to get at the core underlying causes. And so we should help them do that. We should be facilitators and mentors, but don't hand them a solution. The solution has to come, the design has to be done either with the people or ideally by the people, where again, we are facilitators and mentors. So that's a critical part of humanity-centered design. It has to be collaborative design, co-design.
So it sounds like you're evolving the designers that you taught for years to take on this role of collaborators and facilitators and co-designers. Are there specific skills that they need to have that traditionally the design education system was not equipping them with?
Well, yes. It turns out if you try to work in a community, the most important skill that you have is psychiatry. You have to deal with all the different personalities and all the arguments and all of the fights that they're going to have. Because it's really nice to say we should let the community decide what they want, but you bring the community together and they fight with each other. They have different opinions. And you have to figure out how on earth you can have them collate, come together on a solution. Because quite often those different opinions are each valid, but they result from people looking at it from different perspectives, different points of view. And you have to somehow figure out how you can find something that they all will agree on. But the worst part of that is after you find that out and you help and you're beginning to start the work and you have another meeting of the community, different people come in. And so suddenly they disagree with what's going on. And so it's a difficult job. So a lot of what I talk about is really easy to understand and really easy to explain to people and very, very difficult to do.
So if it's very difficult to do, I think even your research on sort of user experience shows that people tend to do what's easier to do than what's hard to do, right?
Yep.
So if we have a definition of designing for humanity-centric organizations, and it's really difficult to do, what can we do to ensure that designers actually put in the effort as opposed to do what's easy, which is not worry about the psychiatry of the people and
Well,
all
we
that
have
dissension
to,
going on?
I think we have to change the reward structures that we have. A part of the problem is that our companies of the world in the Western economic system is really based on profit. And so that if you try to see what it is that we are trying to optimize, it's usually profit. And that requires you to optimize schedule and cost. And nowhere is there anything about optimizing the quality of life. The same with STEM. I'm against STEM education. I'm highly educated in science and technology and engineering and math. But notice in STEM, there's nothing about people. Shouldn't we be teaching about people? And how do you learn about people? Well, unfortunately, the academic institutions of the world have divided into extremely narrow specialties. So if you want to learn about people, don't go to psychology or sociology or anthropology. They'll tell you about some very narrow aspect. If you want to learn about people, well, go to a novelist. Because someone who writes a fiction story about people has to make it so they sound like real people. They do the things that real people do. And they means they have to be really good observers of people, and they put it all together. Now, the psychologists may have good theoretical explanations of things that people do, but they don't know how to put it together. And the novelist is the one who may not know why people do what they do, but understands what their behavior. So it's complex, but well, look, what I say is everything important is difficult.
Yeah. So if you look at that, right, and I agree that if you layer on an understanding of people onto just about everyone's role and everyone's position, from a designer to a CEO, they can make more informed and hopefully decisions that end up better for humanity.
But I also think that the company should be rewarded for improving the quality of life. And we should have different statistics that tell you the value of a company, not just its profits, not its margins and profits and total sales, but how did it improve people's lives? The same with countries. Instead of having the gross domestic product as the measure of a company, which simply tells you how much money the company spends, the country spends, whether for good or for bad, then why not measure the quality of life of the citizens? And there are people trying to do this, and there are measures that we can use. There's even a country or two that's trying. But I think it has to be adopted by the major industrial countries of the world, because the small countries that are trying these experiments. But I think we have to change the economic system, because in some sense, that's what's behind a lot of what is taking place today. And I'm not saying we should destroy it. I'm not saying that I'm against profits. Company has to make a profit to stay in business. But it doesn't have to be an extreme profit. But moreover, if the employees feel that they are accomplishing improving people's quality of life, including their own, guess what? They're better employees. They're probably more efficient employees. You get less turnover. And turnover, people love to talk about productivity of their workers, but when they push them hard to be more productive, a lot of them quit. And every time someone quits and has to be replaced, you lose 6 months or more, because it takes time to replace them, and then it takes time to train them up again. People don't count that in the productivity score. So I think that actually you could do this, and you could make things better, and you could do things without destroying the environment, and actually improve the quality of the company and maybe even its profits.
It's funny. I hear a lot of what you said are things that I've said over. I've done a lot of the research that ties employee attitudes and engagement to their productivity and all the things you talk about. So it's interesting. Sounds like we need more well-rounded designers so that they can become more senior in organizations.
Not everybody has to. Some designers love their skills and they're good at it, and yes, that's fine. Same in engineering, by the way. Big companies often have two tracks. One is the administrative track, and the other is the engineering track, the technical track. And you can get promoted on that, but the people who become the managers and the vice presidents and the CEOs, they're in the administrative track because they're thinking more broadly. And there are maybe less of them, but in some sense they're more important. When I became vice president of Apple, I could no longer talk about the things that I thought I cared about, making things easier to use and understand. But guess what? I got to go to the FCC, and I argued for the very first Wi-Fi ban, and we got it. And I had to convince the FCC commissioners against the AT&T and others who were against it. Even the fire departments were against it, thinking it would take away from their communication abilities. And to do that, though, I had to go around and talk to all the experts in Wi-Fi and the types of things we do. And then I had to spend time in Washington visiting all the Congress people and their staffs, and learn about all the commissioners before I was able to talk, because I had to be able to talk to what the commissioners talked about, not what I talked about. And later on, I was part of the effort to get decent high-definition television standards, which was a big fight between the television companies and the computer companies, because we wanted a great picture, and the television companies didn't care. They wanted more bandwidth so they could have more channels and make more money. It was, but again, it got me to a very different level of power, if you will, and complexity than if I had just stayed as a designer.
Cool. And before we leave the new book, because I want to get to a little bit about the Design Award and Summit to make sure our listeners learn a little bit about that. Any other lessons from the book that you'd want the audience, the new book, the audience to know about?
I'm quickly reviewing what's in the book. Not really. I think the meaningful requires some explanation, but I'll skip it for the amount. But, well, I'll just say I talked already about GDP. It's a number, but it's not very meaningful. It doesn't tell you much about the country, and that we should be careful of the climate. It will change if we go above 1.5 degrees rise in temperature since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And what? If temperature changes more than that every day, what are you talking about? People don't understand that. And it's because actually they're not people, the scientists who talk about it are talking scientific. That is, they're talking about heat, not about temperature. And so that we have to learn to talk about in ways that everyday people understand, and measure a country by, is it good in education? Is it good in public health? Is it good in this? Is it good in that? Or is it bad in this? Or bad in that? So we know where you need some help and where you're doing just fine. And every country has its goods and its bads. So, no, that's it.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of design that can happen to just the way we communicate, for sure. Now, I want to make sure we touch on your amazing Design Award and Summit. So the Don Norman Design Award focuses on supporting early career professionals and educators. Why is this stage in a designer's journey so critical? And maybe you can share a little bit about what your goal is and what the award is all about.
Well, a number of my friends suggested that they initiate an award in my name, and it would be nice we would find some important designer and give them an award. And I said no. I was reluctant to call it under my name. They insisted, though, that my name was known and that would help. But I also didn't want to give it to a famous designer. I've gotten awards, and guess what? They're meaningless. I mean, they're nice. I'm not complaining about getting the award. It's really nice and feels good. But it doesn't change what I'm doing. I want it when you're just starting out. It's when you need encouragement. It's hard. It seems that nobody recognizes what you're doing, or even maybe it's just small local people who recognize. And I said, it's these early career people who need the reward. And I deliberately said career, not age. So you could be 70 years old and decide that, maybe I should try to help society. And you go and you do some project, and you're early in this part of your career. So you are eligible. And I also reward people. I reward the educational groups that train people to do this. In both cases, I also want evidence, some sort of evidence that you're doing good. Now, it turns out that most of these early career people don't have any notion of how to collect evidence. So we're going to have to do tutorials on how to do that. And I want the evidence for the educational group. Doesn't have to be a formal education. Doesn't have to be university or college. It could be who knows, a boot camp. But they have to demonstrate that they are effective by showing a number of graduates who are now doing societal work, societal benefits. And so we launched this in the beginning of 2023. No, I'm sorry, beginning of 2024. And in the first year, it was amazing because we got applications from 26 different countries, and we were able to find wonderful projects. I mean, I recall when as I was reading, because I read every single application, how I started crying at some of them.
Those people who are interested in the award, when's the timing for putting in a nomination?
Well, we were hoping that we would open up nominations February 15th. We may not make it, but just a second and let me bring up the actual dates. February, March. Yeah. So if you're doing a project, the application has to be in by March 31. But just a simple application, it's a qualifying one. It's where we look at it and say, is that a sensible project? Okay, good. Are you really early career? Okay, good. Are you fitting some of the other requirements, which mainly is humanity-centered, and doing one of the United Nations 16 different goals, 16, not 17. And if so, then we accept you and say, now submit a full application. But then you have another 2 months to do that so that you'll actually be able to develop some real conclusions that you can make. And moreover, you can even redo the beginning part where you said what you were going to do and who's doing it. That may have changed. So that's okay. You can modify it. And so and the same with educational institutions. They can send it anytime they want. They are not a contest. Education, as long as you show us that you're doing good work, good, we'd love to list the whole world. But the projects are contests because you get an award and you get the trophy, you get some money.
Awesome. Well,
but we have a website. And
I'll put it in the podcast.
Yeah, and that's where you should look. Right now it's the old website, but in fact, as soon as the new website is up is when everything's announced. But it will be up in a week or two, and you can tell whether it's the 2024 website versus the 2025.
So our listeners should know. Our listeners should know that I will actively promote that award when it comes up. If you haven't noticed, I'm indebted to Don for a lot of his work. I think our listeners who know me would say, oh my goodness, I think I've heard Bruce say very similar things over the years. And I love the direction of both the new book and the awards and summit. And I'm going to do whatever I can to help amplify your work in that area.
Here's
because
what
it's
we
great
need
work.
most at this point. It's what every nonprofit needs. And I've talked to a large number of the nonprofits, and every one of them is suffering for lack of funds. We need funders. And we got through the first year, and we are, at this point, we don't have enough money to complete the second year. We're pretty confident we will manage to get it through, but it's really hard. We could use basically a major funder because we have no full-time employees, and we don't need many, but we need 1 or 2 full-time employees.
I have some closing questions for you, some rapid fire closing questions. The first is, what's one leadership skill that you think will become even more important in the future?
I think it's breadth, being able to understand that we're in a complex world and understanding many different components of it. Also understanding that people, I start my book, Design a Better World, which saying almost everything we see is artificial. And so when we grow up, though, we're born into the world and we grow up in this world. And we think that what we're doing is perfectly normal and natural, and how could it be any other way? And so it's when you come to a different culture that does things quite differently, you quite often think, well, why are they doing it that, or that's wrong? And we have to really realize that different cultures have their way of living, and on the whole, those cultures are fine. And we should encourage them to maintain their culture. There's only one reason why you shouldn't. It comes from who was it? Karl Popper, I think, the philosopher. I have it written on here. Yeah, Karl Popper, who said, the problem is to maintain a tolerant society where we're tolerant of all other cultures, we have to be intolerant of those who are intolerant. So there are some cultures who think we are wrong and want to kill all of us. Well, no, we can't be tolerant of them.
Nice. There's two more questions. They're quickies. The first one is, I give all of my guests a magic wand for the moment. If you could wave the magic wand and immediately make things change, what would you do to make organizations more humanity-centric?
I would change the economic system and the reward structure that's as a result of the economic system, that it should be for doing good, not for making money. Making money could be the secondary quality, but I think the primary should be improving quality of life. And there are companies already doing that. And there are even a few countries doing that. And I've talked to so many people who understand and believe in this, but say they can't do it within their organization. There's too much that would have to change. So my magic wand would make it possible. And almost always, it revolves around the economics and also the reward structure of the company, of the institution, of the world, for that matter.
Yeah. Cool. And my last question is just sort of for leaders inspired by your work, what's one final piece of advice you'd want to leave with our listeners?
I would love it if those people who all agree about this thing could help and band together. It's interesting. Just before I went on to this podcast, it was supposed to be a 30-minute talk to someone in Montreal, Canada, who I met recently when I gave a talk in Palo Alto, California. And he's wonderful. He is doing humanity-centered design. He wants to build infrastructure to help whenever there's a crisis, whether it's an earthquake or fire or a landslide or maybe even a war. And in the same way, and so we talked about how we might work together, and I'm going to get him together with a few of the other organizations I have found that are doing similar things. But also, there's no way where people doing this work can get together. And we talked about the need for a society of practitioners, not academics, practitioners, to share ideas. And you have to be careful. Right now, when practitioners do get together, it's mainly for advertising. They say the wonderful work they've done and why their company is so wonderful. No, I don't want to hear that. I want to hear how can we help everybody else do things that are wonderful for the world? And so there are a number of people who would like to have that happen. And I tried to do that once, but unfortunately, I can't do everything. And so having somebody like that help me and having others help us do different components, well, it's called delegation, and that's how it should work, because the DNDA, Don Norman Design Award, doesn't have to do everything. What I care about is the end result. I don't care about the credit or the name. And so, yes, I'm going to work with this other person I won't name yet because it's still not a public thing, to help establish such a society, and other people to help move the world forward.
Well, Don, I want to be part of that effort as well. I'd love to participate in that. And I just fully enjoyed this conversation. I could have gone for hours and hours, but I want to thank you so much for your time, for your work in the past, and your work going forward. Thanks, Don.
Thank you, Bruce.
I hope you found my conversation with Don Norman as inspiring as I did. His vision for humanity-centered design challenged us to think bigger, to see design not just as a tool for user experience, but as a force for global good. If this discussion resonated with you, I encourage you to share it with others and subscribe to the podcast for more thought-provoking conversations. Now, let's reflect on some of the key takeaways from my conversation with Don, along with a few additional insights on how leaders and designers can start making a difference today. Join me in the after show. Welcome to the after show. I hope that was as fun for you as it was for me. My conversation with Don Norman was packed with insights, and I want to highlight a few big ideas that really stood out. One of the most striking points Don made was about AI. It's powerful, but not actually intelligent. AI doesn't think, understand, or reason. It just predicts patterns. We already use AI constantly. Our phone cameras sharpen images, our search engines predict what we're looking for, and smart assistants generate responses. But Don emphasized that AI is not a replacement for human creativity and decision-making. Instead, it should be seen as a collaborator, helping us generate ideas, refine designs, and streamline work. And by the way, you'll see a lot of that in the predictions that I made for AI this year. As a matter of fact, a lot of the discussions we had together sound like things that I might have said as well. The second point that I found fascinating was when Don said the design of everyday things is wrong. The Design of Everyday Things is his first book that just about every designer in the world knows and has read and probably holds close to them. But now he said it was wrong. It was a bold statement, considering how foundational that book has been for designers. But he wasn't saying the book's principles were flawed. He still stands by everything in it. Instead, he believes it was missing something critical. The book focused on making things intuitive and easy to use, but it didn't consider the broader impact of design on society, the environment, and future generations. Don realized that while improving usability is valuable, we also have to think about sustainability, ethics, and systemic consequences. This shift is at the heart of his new book, Design for a Better World. He argues that design must move beyond just enhancing individual experiences and start addressing global challenges, climate change, social equity, and well-being. And this isn't just a design challenge, it's a leadership challenge. Every leader should be asking, are we optimizing for convenience and profit, or are we creating something that truly improves the world? This ties to another key theme, how we measure success. Right now, companies are judged by profit, and countries rely on GDP. But those don't tell us if people's lives are actually getting better. What if companies were measured by how much they improve well-being, sustainability, and social good? The challenge, of course, is that even when leaders want to prioritize these things, they're often stuck in a system that rewards short-term financial gains. Changing this requires rethinking how we incentivize and measure progress at every level. One of Don's strongest critiques was about the colonialist system approach to problem solving, where experts study a problem, come up with a solution, and hand it off. That often fails because it doesn't take into account the lived experience of the people affected. Instead, Don believes in co-designing solutions with communities. Whether you're a designer, a leader, or a policymaker, the question to ask is, are you imposing solutions or are you empowering people to create their own? Don is putting these ideas into action with the Non-Norman Design Award, which celebrates early career innovators who are already making a difference. His reasoning is simple. Established designers don't need more recognition, but people at the start of their careers often lack validation and support. It's a great reminder for all of us. How are we encouraging the next generation of change makers? Whether in design, leadership, or any field, we should be creating opportunities for emerging voices to drive meaningful impact. So what's the big takeaway for me? Design and leadership aren't just about making things easier. They're about making things better for humanity. That means 1, using AI as a tool, but not mistaking it for intelligence. 2, thinking beyond individual users and considering systemic impact. 3, redefining success to focus on well-being, not just profits. And number 4, empowering people to co-create solutions rather than imposing them. Don's latest book, Design for a Better World, challenges us to step up and rethink how we create, measure, and lead. What resonated most with you from today's conversations? Let's keep the discussion going, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to Humanity at Scale, Redefining Leadership podcast. Remember, true leadership isn't only about achieving short-term results. It's about creating a lasting, positive impact on all of the people you touch. Join me next time as we uncover more insights and strategies for humanity-centric leadership. Until then, I'm Bruce Temkin, encouraging you to lead with purpose and empathy and to be the spark that elevates humanity at scale.